susters, baie welkom by ons oordenkingie wat ons het voor kerk. Ek het verskeie opsies gehad, gedink aan hierdie en gedink aan daai. Toe dink ek in die tye wat ons leef. En die Bybel sê vir ons duidelik, daar's min mense wat in die koninkryk sal ingaan. En ek glo ons almal wil ingaan. Toe gaan kyk ek bietjie wat staan in Matteus 24. En die Israeliete was baie, die disciples, opgemaak met die tempel. Die tempel was die plek, is ons aanbid by die tempel. En ek dink hulle die tempel dalk meer aanbid as wat hulle Jesus aanbid het. Kom ons lees Matteus 24. En Jesus het uitgegaan en van die tempel vertrek, en sy disciples het nader gekom om hom die geboue van die tempel te wys. Hoeveel jaar oud was Jesus? Het hy nie die tempel geken nie? Was hy nie al daar gewees nie? En Jesus gooi bietjie koue water op hulle. En Jesus sê vir hulle, sien julle al hierdie dinge? Voorwaar ek sê vir julle, daar sal sekerlik nie een klip op 'n ander gelaat word wat nie afgebreek sal word nie. En dit het presies so gebeur, dat daai klippe die een van die ander gebreek geword het, oor die goud wat daarin gesmelt het, toe die tempel afgebrand het. En toe die disciples vers 3 alleen by hom was, hulle wou nie eers hulle voor ander mense vra en gewag tot hulle alleen is en sê, vertel ons, wanneer sal hierdie dinge wees en wat is die teken van die koms en van die volëinding van die wêreld? Hulle daarom dit toe al besef, dat as Jesus kom, gaan in die volëinding van die wêreld wees. En Jesus gee hulle baie snaakse antwoord, en pas op, en sê vir hulle, pas op, dat niemand julle mislei nie. Hoe kan jy mislei word, as jy nie die ware ding ken nie? Tydjie gelede was ons in Meyerton, en net so, toe tel iemand by 'n til vir my 'n vals R2 uit. En toe ek die R2 uit my hand het wil vat om 'n ander winkel te betaal, toe voel ek hy's baie lig. En ek bekyk hom en ek sien toe, hierdie ou was haastig, hy het nie so ordentlike R2 gemaak nie. Daar sulke gaatjies in, soos wanneer 'n mens iets smelt, waar daar liggaatjies in is. Dit so, en toe gaan Jesus aan met sy waarskuwing, want baie sal onder my naam kom en sê ek is die Christus, en hulle sal baie mense mislei. Ek was gelukkig, ek het 'n R2 geken. Ek het geweet hoeveel weeg 'n R2. So, wat dit ook vir my sê, as ek nou moes geld maak, sal ek aan probeer gaan vir 'n R5 en nie 'n R2 nie. Want R2 is maar min, as jy R5 maak, dan is jy 2,5 keer soveel. Maar Jesus sê vir hulle, pas op, want baie sal onder my naam kom en sê ek is die Christus, hulle sal baie mense mislei. Soos ons nie die egte ken nie, sal ons val vir die onegte, die namaaksel. Jesus sê vir ons nog by, en julle sal hoor van oorloë en gerugte van oorloë. Pas op, moenie verskrik word nie, want alles moet plaasvind. So, dit is 'n goeie nuus. Alles moet plaasvind. As mense in 'n winkel of by waar julle by mekaar kom, praat van dit en dit, en sê dis fantastiese nuus, die Bybel sê dit moet plaasvind. Maar dan kom hierdie ander woordjies, maar dit is nog nie die einde nie. Want die een nasie sal teen die ander opstaan, die een koninkryk teen die ander. En daar sal hongersnode wees, pestsiektes, aardbewing, pestsiektes, klink dit nie bekend nie. Aardbewings op verskillende plekke, dit klink soos die nuus. Ek is baie lief vir die kleinsparkie hierbo in Langverwagstraat, want jy loop so by die koerante verby, so ek lees die Engelse opskrif en Afrikaanse opskrif, dan het ek 'n goeie idee wat in gisteraand se nuus was. Maar in vers 8 sê, maar al hierdie dinge is die begin van die smarte. So ons moet ons voorberei, daar gaan swaar tye kom. En dan sal hy julle in verdrukking oorgee en julle doodmaak en julle sal deur die nasies gehaat word ter wille van my naam. Hoekom sal hulle ons wil doodmaak? Hoekom sal ons wil verdruk? Want ons gaan anders wees. Ons gaan anders glo, ons gaan anders doen as vir die wêreld is. En hoe kry ons dit reg? Deur nou voor te berei daarvoor, om Jesus te ken. Iemand wat Jesus ken, lyk anders, hy praat anders, hy dink anders. Soos jy nie anders dink en anders praat nie. Jy 'n probleem, dan ken jy nie Jesus nie. En jy gaan nie staande bly in hierdie tyd nie. En baie valse profete sal opstaan en baie mense mislei. Hoe weet ons wat 'n valse profeet? Ons vergelyk hom met die Bybel. En omdat die ongeregtigheid vermeerder word, sal die liefde vir die meeste mense verkoel. Tel die liefde van God baie vir jou in jou besluite, wat gaan ons hierdie naweek doen, wat gaan ons maak na kerk, Sabbatmiddag, slap ons dit maar om? Broers en susters, dan gaan ons liefde verkoel. Maar vers 13, maar wie volhard tot die einde toe, hy sal gered word. Ons moet volhard. En al hoe ek kan volhard in 'n ding, as ek dit bitter graag wil doen, as ek weet wat die eindresultaat is. Maar daar's 'n verskil. As ek weet wat die eindresultaat is, en ek wil dit nie doen om myself te bewys, dan maak ek 'n groot fout. Maar as ek iets doen, omdat ek iemand liefhet, omdat ek dit vir iemand wil doen, omdat ek daai iemand ken, het jy ander motivering. En ek wil ons vanoggend attent maak op hierdie wil ken, moet ken. As ons nie Jesus ken nie, dan doen ons al hierdie goed te vergeefs. Die swaar tye wat lê, het al begin. Ons sien dit om ons. En die Here het begin deur sê, pas op, dat niemand julle mislei nie. Ek wil julle uitdaag vanoggend, my kerkfamilie, studeer die woord soos nog nooit in van tevore nie. Anderster gaan ons dit nie maak nie. Ons gaan in die bus uitval, wat so onnodig is, want Jesus het gesterf vir ons. Ons is reeds gered, maar ons kan deur ons eie toedoen, ons eie nalatigheid verlore gaan. Kom ons bid saam. Hemelse Vader, dankie vir die kosbare woorde in u woord. Help ons om dit ter harte te neem en volgens u woord te leef. Ons weet, u staan uitgestrekte hande om ons te leer ken, maar ons het baie keer hierdie en daardie verskoningkie. Help ons om die waarheid te sien en te leef, en opgewonde te wees, omdat u ons binnekort gaan kom haal, dat ons saam met u die hemel sal ingaan op die wolke. Ons wil graag daar wees, Here. Help ons dat ons nie deur ons eie nalatigheid u groot offer nietig verklaar nie. Wees met ons in hierdie res van hierdie dag, en hierdie Sabbatskoolles en diens wat volg, is ons gebed in Jesus naam. Amen. Sterkte vir julle, wie volhard tot die einde, hy sal gered word.
Putting God first can be difficult. What can we learn from John that will help us put God first in our lives today? John was the youngest of all the disciples. He loved Jesus with all his heart. When all other disciples scattered following Jesus' arrest, John stayed close to Jesus through the entire ordeal. Jesus honored his faithfulness by giving him the mission of caring for the woman who cared for Jesus the most, Mary, his mother. But when he was young, John was vengeful and angry. It was hard for him to feel compassion for those who rejected Jesus. Once, he suggested to Jesus that fire should come from heaven and destroy the Samaritans who rejected Jesus. Putting God first in John's life wasn't a single moment of courage. Instead, it was a lifelong commitment to love as Jesus loved. To put God first for John meant to give Jesus his temper as a costly offering. And the sacrifice of self at the feet of Jesus led John to offer him all his other desires. After Jesus returned to heaven, John remained faithful until his death, some 70 years later. His letters to the churches provide the greatest insight into his conversion. Here are his own words: "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God." He also said, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever." Sometimes we're disappointed that we still cannot control our temper or overcome our worldly passions. But John went through a profound transformation over a lifetime by putting God first every day of his life. His example compels us to do the same. As we return our tithe and give our promise, we are challenged to put God first.
It was nearly 20 years ago when I visited the country of Chad. I flew from Washington to Paris, then I caught a direct Air France flight straight to Jamena. I went to many places in Chad and I was quickly reminded of the vital importance of water. Half the country is desert, but water is precious everywhere. And I'll never forget meeting a man who'd been waiting months and months for baptism, but there was just no water. When I got to Chad, kind church members welcomed me like I was a long-lost family member. Everywhere they told me how happy they were that their world church hadn't forgotten them. I didn't know much about the country, but I did know it was poor. Not just uncomfortably poor, but kind of how are we going to survive tomorrow kind of poor. More than 80% of the population existed below the poverty line, and life expectancy was less than 48 years. I think it's fair to say that 20 years ago, most Adventists living in America or Europe or Australia or wherever hadn't given a whole lot of thought to the country of Chad. In fact, even today, many of us would probably have trouble even locating it on a map. And yet, I found a mission office in the capital, Jamena. I found vibrant churches and companies. I found schools filled with beautiful children and even a small hospital. And there was a large group of dedicated, sacrificial global mission pioneers who were planting new groups of believers around the country. I found a church in Chad which, like the rest of the country, was desperately poor. But here's my point. The church was alive. It was active. It was witnessing. They had projects and programs. They were making a difference in their community. And how did that happen? Well, it was through the work of the Holy Spirit and through church members around the world who had faithfully given their tithes and mission offerings, not knowing where each dollar would necessarily end up. Thanks to the church's system of tithes and offerings, mission in Chad had been funded by church members around the world who knew nothing about mission in Chad. I got to thinking about the old expression, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Roughly translated, it means that whoever makes the most noise, they're the ones who get the most funding. And sometimes in our church, it's the big wheel organizations with the most interesting pictures, the most compelling video, the most heart-touching stories that get the big donations. They get the grease, so to speak, the funding. And that's great insofar as it goes. But what do we do about those parts of the world or those people groups who can't or don't squeak, so to speak? What do? Just ignore them? The church's system of regular and systematic offerings, what the stewardship ministries calls promise, is just like a river. Every time we give our mission offerings, we're adding water to a life-giving river that flows through often parched lands, bringing life and hope. We're helping the church grow not only locally, but also in areas we may not have even heard of. We're helping missionaries we may never meet. We're building schools and clinics we'll probably never visit. We're helping plant churches we may never worship in. But we're bringing life to the church's mission. I don't know what every drop of water in this river does or where it goes, but I see the results, and they're beautiful. Psalm 104 says, "He sends the springs into the valleys. They flow among the hills. They give drink to every beast of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. By them the birds of the heavens have their home. They sing among the branches." We have the privilege of helping church members see that their offerings are like a life-giving mission river flowing through often parched lands. This river makes it possible for missionaries to be placed all around the world. It helps the church's educational and medical and humanitarian ministries and so much more. The past few years, we've seen millions of people give their hearts to Jesus and join the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Thousands of new congregations have been started. How do we care for the nurture of these new believers? How do we provide resources and materials that they need? How do we provide ongoing pastoral care? Life-giving mission offerings given regularly and systematically help sustain and grow new work around the world. And that's what the church is all about.